VRR on PS5 has completely been tested, but is it as good as VRR on Xbox? We got a brand new drop of Xbox Game Pass games for May, as well as the May Xbox update. And Square Enix, they just sold off their Western studios. Are they setting themselves up for a complete sale? So since the launch of this generation of consoles, in my opinion, Xbox has been by far the better console, especially when it comes to features and quality of life features such as the backwards compatibility, the upgrading of those games, things like VRR, the quick resume, the smart delivery, all of these features that people were touting as just buzzwords have really shined, and shows that the Xbox engineering team really thought about a lot of things before the release of the Xbox Series X and S. And like I said, one of those things is VRR, which was available on Xbox from the launch of the console. We knew it was coming over to PS5, and it is finally here. It's finally launched for the PlayStation 5, and now it's been completely tested. And let's take a look at the results of it. So this is from Eurogamer, and they did a big breakdown as to how VRR works on the PlayStation 5. And right away we see here there are some issues with it. It works generally well for what it's supposed to do and for the displays that support it. But there is one big thing missing here that is not on par with Xbox, and that is the ability to use VRR with HDMI 2.0. Currently with the PlayStation 5 is actually only being able to be used with HDMI 2.1. And if you don't know what VRR is, it is a feature that allows games to be smoothed out, that have uneven frame rates, reduces jitters within games, and eliminates screen tearing. One of the biggest examples as VRR working very well right at the launch of the Xbox Series X and S was with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where there was some screen tearing when the game first launched before they patched it, and VRR completely took that out of the picture. So this feature is very important for a lot of games that have these issues. You can just get rid of it if you have a display that has the VRR functionality. Now with the PlayStation 5, there is definitely a difference after going through this between the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5's implementation of this. First of all, one of the biggest things that we're seeing that the difference is between them is the fact that the PlayStation 5 VRR only works with HDMI 2.0. And Tech Radar talked about this in their testing of VRR on PlayStation 5, some of the biggest drawbacks between the two, between the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S. And it is, they say here, perhaps the biggest issue with VRR though is the fact that Sony chose to use the HDMI 2.1 VRR standard and not AMD FreeSync, which right away will make it pretty much not usable with a lot of different displays out there, a lot of different monitors that have the HDMI 2.0 standard. And it continues on here to say, for most modern TVs, this won't be a problem, but there are countless displays and monitors in particular that can benefit from this version of VRR, including those that only have an HDMI 2.0 port. And I saw early when PS5's VRR came out on social media, people were trying to figure out why it wasn't working with their displays, and then they finally discovered that it was because of the HDMI 2.0 port, it not being compatible with it. And it's just a big feature that people who have those displays will not be able to use. But with the Xbox Series X and S, it does support FreeSync for VRR and can work with a much wider range of compatible displays. Now, the other issue with the PS5 VRR is the fact that it's only functionable within a small, narrow, and that is with displays between 48 Hz and 60 Hz on a 60 Hz screen, and then 48 Hz and 120 Hz on a 120 Hz screen. And generally there's a feature called low frame rate compensation, which will kick in if these frame rates fall below that window, the 48 to 60, and then it'll essentially double the frame rates, ensure that the VRR remains working when you're playing through your game. But apparently that is not implemented right now on the PS5. It says on PS5 though, it's possible to drop out of the VRR window entirely, which can lead to judder and all of the other symptoms that VRR seeks to alleviate. Now, there is good news to that though, because developers can actually implement a patch to mimic the LFC functionality, but of course that's going to be completely up to the developers. Insomniac has done this with some PS5 games with Spider-Man Miles Morales and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Now, in terms of implementing and using VRR when you're playing on your PS5, there's actually two options. There is enabling VRR for the supported games and then enabling VRR in all of the PlayStation 5 games, which will force VRR even if there is no implementation of it on that game. And that's where you use that feature to use it for games like Elden Ring, Ghostwire, I think Assassin's Creed Valhalla back when it first came out, where these games would have issues and then you just implement it. Now, what's interesting about that second mode where you're enabling VRR in all PlayStation 5 games, it doesn't work on some of the first-party games. It says here, from our initial testing, it looks like most games will work in this mode, with only one game out of the dozens we tested, Gran Turismo 7, failing to work. And in this case, the game still ran fine, but VRR wasn't enabled. So perhaps this can be fixed in an upcoming patch of the game. And Horizon Forbidden West, another first-party Sony game, doesn't appear to be working with VRR right now, but again, can be updated by a patch, and then maybe it will be working in the future. And then there was another example where VRR was causing issues to the actual lighting of these games, saying TVs cannot simultaneously enable VRR and local dimming, so enabling VRR can see visual fidelity drop precipitously as a result. Likewise, most displays also can't enable black frame insertion and VRR at the same time. So if you use black frame insertion to improve motion clarity, then you have to choose between it and VRR. So in general, I would say from what we're seeing right now with the PlayStation 5 implementation of VRR is that it works fine for the games that it works with. If you have an HDMI 2.1, it does what it's supposed to do, and it's still a very welcome feature to the console, but obviously it is not on par with what the Xbox Series X and S have with the VRR feature. All right, jumping over here to May's first drop of Xbox Game Pass games. And overall, I think this is actually a very good list of games. Not like one huge title, but lots of stuff to be excited for. And we'll start off here at the beginning of the list with Loot River. And now a lot of these games, we already knew that they were coming. They were the indies. They were showing off at ID at Xbox, and we already got the dates for them. But Loot River was one of those announcements. It was a day one game. It is a day one game, which is actually available right now on cloud, console, and PC. And it's like a roguelike, procedurally generated dungeon crawler style of game with a very cool looking graphics. So highly recommend going and check that out if you're into that type of stuff. Trek to Yomi, which is another day one Game Pass game. When people saw this one, I think a lot of people were very excited for it. It's like that samurai side scrolling, almost reminds us of like Ghost of Tsushima, and with really cool graphics. Looks like it's going to be a very good story and a lot of fun in terms of the combat in that game. So I'm very excited to check this one out on May 5th. We have Citizen Sleeper, another day one Xbox Game Pass game. It's like a tabletop RPG, and you are working in a lawless station at the edge of an interstellar society. So if you're into that type of thing, you'll want to check that one out as well. You have Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair Anniversary Edition, available on May 10th. And this is a Japanese game. It's a narrative style game where you are trapped in a dangerous situation. You must survive through the class trial. So very narrative driven, pretty much just kind of like a storybook as you're going through it. I've never checked it out, but great to see another big popular Japanese game, as I've seen a lot of people talking about this and excited that this game is coming out to Xbox Game Pass. And then we have another day one game, which is May 10th, and this is Eiyuden Chronicles Rising, and this is an action JRPG, side-scrolling with very cool graphics. I've checked out a bunch of videos on it, and looks like a ton of fun. This is one that I would definitely want to check out at some point. Again, another Japanese game. So they're continuing to add Japanese games, which I think will entice more people in Japan and in that part of the world to try to jump in and try Game Pass, especially when they're available on the cloud and you can play it through your phone. Then we have A War of Mine Final Cut, and this is a game I've never heard about, so I had to look it up and see what it was all about. But it seems like there's different scenarios that you go through, and you are trying to go through different locations and kind of survive war and just stay alive overall. And you can see the kind of graphic style it has. Almost kind of reminds me of like a Fallout Shelter graphic style, but more realistic than the mobile game. But looks pretty cool. Different stories you're going to go through, I believe, and different characters you're going to have to try to save and try to survive with. And then finally, NHL 22 is coming to console on EA Play, which is what we see every single year. Their sports games, they usually come out onto Xbox Game Pass 6 to 7 months after their release. And with NHL 22, it's just really adding to a really strong sports game lineup. If you're somebody who likes sports games, there are a lot of people out there who really enjoy sports games. Even NBA 2K22, which stealth dropped the other week onto Xbox Game Pass, really bolstering the line. You have NHL, you have NBA, you have Madden, FIFA's gonna come over, you have a bunch of race games, F1, and just other sports games there. You have MLB The Show, which was a day one game. We know it's a PlayStation Studios game, which I've been playing a lot of, an awesome sports game. So many great sports games to jump into, and just making that genre stronger on Xbox Game Pass. And this is going to be a yearly occurrence, at least as long as EA Play is a part of the service, where you're going to be getting all of the EA sports games 6-7 months after they release. So if you're not somebody who needs to jump in and play the new version on day one every single year, you're going to be able to still check them out at a later time. And I would argue right now is a great time to be releasing them too, because you have the NHL playoffs, you have the NBA playoffs, MLB season started, so there's a lot of hype around those sports and people are going to want to jump in and play them. But all in all, like I said, not like the biggest month, but similar to April, but I think this lineup here is stronger than what we got in April overall, with some of the exciting games. Like Loot River looks like a ton of fun. Trek to Yomi, I can't wait to try out. Aiden Chronicle Rising, after watching the videos on how that game plays, looks really, really good. And NHL 22, I'm a hockey fan, so I'll probably be jumping into some of that. Okay, moving over here to the May Xbox update. Now, this is a very small update, nothing that crazy, nothing that big or exciting. There's actually only two things that are talked about within this update. And the first one is having to do with the actual Xbox app itself. They're adding a stories option. So the stories option that we've seen across multiple different social media channels like Snapchat, Instagram, all that type of stuff, where you can now add channels about games you're playing and share them within the Xbox community and add text them and all that type of stuff. So it says here the story channel is located right on the home screen of the Xbox app. To create a story, click the plus button on your gamer tag located within the stories channel, and then select the game clip, screenshot, or achievement that you want to post from the gallery. Once selected, you will go to the story preview page where you can choose to add a caption to your post, then click the post button located at the bottom right. Stories channel shows content from the last 72 hours. Anything you share is also posted to your activity feed on your profile. So I mean, that's pretty cool. I like what they're trying to do here with keeping the Xbox community within that app, where you can see all of the activity from what your friends are doing, share the cool things you found within games, rather than kind of going off and sharing it off into Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And you're going to have it all in one place. It's cool. I mean, people are still going to be sharing it on social media because you get a lot more people seeing what you're actually doing within the games. But I like that when you go onto that app, there is actually going to be some sort of features, social features, to keep you interested and occupied into what is going on within the gaming community. Now, the next thing here has to do with connection and lag, and it is quality of service tagging, where you're actually going to be able to go in and tag what you want to be prioritized if you are experiencing lag within games. So it says the quality of service tagging is a new service for Xbox consoles and sets priority tags on latency sensitive outbound networking traffic such as party chat, console streaming, and multiplayer within supported games. This helps protect your gaming experience from connection issues during times of congestion on supported networks. So I think this one's definitely welcomed if you have been having issues when there's a lot of stuff going on within the network. It will prioritize things that you want to be prioritized. For example, playing multiplayer games so you don't get disconnected or don't experience as much lag and then not get disconnected from the game. That's huge because that happens to people across the board. And then there are two options within the settings that you're going to be able to tick off with this new feature. They are the DSCP tagging enabled and the WMM tagging. Now, the difference between these two is that the DSCP, or the differentiated service code point tagging, is on the IPv4 and the IPv6 packet level, and it's used for both wired and wireless network connections, where they identify latency sensitivity across the network traffic you're prioritized during times of network congestion. And then you have the WMM, which is the Wi-Fi multimedia, and this is done at the wireless packet level and is only active on wireless network connection. So depending on the type of connection that you use for your Xbox, you're going to have to choose the correct one. But I mean, yeah, not too much here in terms of an update, nothing too big, especially in terms of like the actual dashboard itself and improving the quality of the Xbox dashboard when you log in and play your games. And finally, let's talk about Square Enix. So as we know, a couple days ago, Square Enix sold off their Western studios for $300 million. A ton of people were surprised about this because of the fact that they only sold it for $300 million. And it just sounded off the bat like a really great deal for the Embracer Group. But doing a little bit more digging into it, Although I think it is still a good deal in terms of the studios they're getting, because very high quality studios with the games that they make, especially Crystal Dynamics, with the Tomb Raider reboot series being one of my favorite trilogies that I've played in a very, very long time. Their profit margins for Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal were very low, and that's probably why Square Enix sold it for the $300 million and were happy to get rid of it, almost like baggage on them for what they are wanting to do from what they talked about in this sale, which was move forward with things like play to earn and blockchain games, which for me personally, hearing that is concerning if Square Enix is going to go down those lines. But there's another point out here that people are saying, and that is specifically here from Jeff Grubb. He's talking about this deal and he says, 300 million isn't a lot, but Square Enix was clearly out of patience and ideas for Crystal Dynamics and Eidos. They tried Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, and then they tried Marvel. In 2021, both companies barely broke even. Square is cutting and running. And then he goes on to say, Square Enix is not alone in struggling with profitability. For years, when EA had games projected to make less than 15% profit margin, it would cancel them. It closed studios. Activision will make a successful game, and then that studio would be on COD because margins were small. But it's also impossible to look at Square dumping some fairly valuable IP outside of the context of the current market. This does leave Square Enix far more streamlined for potential acquisition. No idea if that happens, but it's more likely today than yesterday. And this has a lot of people talking about, is Square Enix looking to sell completely? Are they looking to just offload everything and sell it to one of these big companies? Microsoft, Sony probably would be the one that has the best chance because of that relationship with them. I mean, they're Japanese as well. Tencent, any of these big companies that are looking to buy, is this what Square Enix is setting themselves up for? And Jeff Grubb here makes a good point that right now, after getting rid of those Western studios, it does make them more streamlined. It will make the acquisition easier. And he also mentions here that don't get hung up on the blockchain stuff. It seems to me that Square CEO is fixated on it because he thinks it helps him in negotiations and earnings calls, but potential buyers can see through it. So if that is correct, maybe there isn't too much to worry about when it comes to the blockchain stuff, because hearing that really makes you think that they sold those Western studios so that they can invest more in this blockchain stuff, which is not a direction I think a lot of people want to see Square Enix go down. And this is just another company in those acquisition rumors, and the acquisition rumors have been crazy recently with the WB game stuff and now this. And in terms of the rumors, generally when we see acquisitions, they come out of nowhere. Like, nobody predicted the Embracer Group purchasing the Western studios of Square Enix, or at least that I saw. Nobody predicted Bethesda, nobody predicted Activision Blizzard. And this is just speculation. He's not saying it's going to be sold or anything, but the points he is making does make sense in terms of the streamlining of the company so that it's easier to kind of just ship it off. And when it comes to games as a service, there are a lot of games within Square Enix. So that's why I think, again, if one company would be looking at buying Square Enix now, especially because they are a Japanese company, I think Sony probably would make the most sense. I don't know if this is a company that Xbox would be trying to get. It would definitely help them get a foothold in Japan with a game like Final Fantasy, but with the Activision Blizzard deal still trying to go through, it will, but it's still in the works right now. I don't know if Square Enix is something that will be on their radar. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. What do you think about the PlayStation 5 implementation of VRR versus Xbox? What are your thoughts on the first drop of Xbox Game Pass games plus the Xbox May update? And do you think Square Enix is setting themselves up to be sold? If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you're new here, you liked what you saw, consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video.